I know we're all leading busy lives here, so I'm very happy that you could take the time to come and participate in today's webinar. Now, that question and answer area that you have, if you do have questions or comments, please feel free to ask those in that text area. Now, we may not be able to verbally address all the questions over the course of today's webinar, but we will follow up on those through email afterwards. So please just feel free to go ahead and add whatever question that you might have that we can be helpful with when we begin looking at this idea of you as leader coach. And more specifically, why coaching? Why is everybody talking about coaching today? You know, you're all managers and leaders within an organization, and you have lots of tools at your arm's reach to run your business and to manage your people, to lead your people, your own communication, your situational leadership, the being highly directive, telling people what to do, teaching people new skills. And now we're talking about coaching. And why has coaching become so hot today? Well, the list of that I'm presenting on the next slide really gives you some of the outcomes that we know exist in organizations that adopt coaching relationships between their managers and their employees, and really their managers and everybody within the organization. Certainly on the top of that list is this idea of higher performance. We don't do coaching so that we can just have better relationships. We know based on the research that organizations and individuals perform at a higher level when they're engaged with these coach-like conversations that really help them build confidence and find their own answers and problems. So there you see that increased sense of personal accountability for the person receiving the coaching. Number 5, I think, is an important one, new perspectives. One of the things that we often do as coaching is just help challenge somebody's assumptions. Very often people are very limited in the scope of the work that they're doing, and sometimes they get lots of assumptions about that work that need to be challenged, and coaches can do that. Number 10 certainly is a benefit as well. We have improved interpersonal skills for both the coach and the person being coached, not only in that conversation, but that really can propagate throughout your entire organization. So that's why people are coaching. Now, I think Marcus Buckingham also says it great with this quote here. The best strategy for building a competitive organization is to help individuals become more of who they already are. And that's really what we're trying to do with coaching, is to help people more fully realize their potential and their own great expectations of themselves individually and how their role plays out within their organization. Now, when we think about your coaching in the workplace, I have a diagram up here that just puts you at the center of it and has 6 boxes all around. And the intention of this is for you to realize that many times people think a coaching relationship is just between a manager and a direct report. But in my experience, I've seen that we can coach across in the organization, giving some help and support to our peers and the organizations within our company that we need to partner with and cross-collaborate with. You can also even coach up as well and potentially provide some coaching to your manager. Again, given upon how your relationship is and any expectations that you've set around that or that they've set around that. But the point here is to not limit yourself to think about you only engage in these kind of conversations with your directs. I think everybody can both be on the receiving and giving end of a coaching conversation. Now, that little bit of information probably lets you see that there is some ambiguity within coaching as well. And certainly, you all that are leaders within an organization and managers, you have, again, lots of tools at your disposal, and very often you have to walk a tightrope thinking about what's the best tool for me to use at this particular time to get the best performance and meet the business objectives. Sometimes that will be coaching, sometimes it'll be teaching the person a new skill, sometimes it'll be being highly directive. You'll have to make the decision in the moment about what's going to be best for you to move the business forward. And it's not always coaching. You probably know the statement that once you learn to use a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And sometimes people see that in coaching as well. And while coaching is good for lots of situations, there are some times when you might want to use another style. And we'll talk about that, a little bit later in today's webinar. I have another slide here just to make another point around coaching. Like swimming, coaching can't be learned just by reading about it. And I make that point because you can't learn about it just from hearing me on a webinar as well. My suggestion to you is that when you get off this webinar, you think about who you can begin to engage in a coaching conversation today, and to start putting some of these skills and power tools to use so that you can build your own muscles around your ability to coach. Now, I'm curious about you all's experience with coaching before we move on, so Julie's going to put up a poll question in a bit, and the question is, have you ever worked with a professional leadership coach before? And this is just a yes or no question. So, Julie, if you could go ahead and open that poll, and let's see from our population here, how many people have actually worked with an official professional leadership coach?
Hi, Jim. So, yes, we've got this poll launched, and we've got just about a majority of people who have answered. So just give it another few seconds, and then I'm going to close it up.
Okay. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what the population is there in terms of people that have worked with professional coaches before.
So we have 36% of people on the call have worked with a professional coach before, and 64% have not.
Yeah. So that's about typical in terms of the population of folks that have or haven't worked with an official professional coach. Thank you for that, Julie. Now, even though you haven't worked with a professional coach, my experience is that we start to look at your coaching past, and you think about all the managers and people that you've engaged with over the course of your lifetime who have helped you gain insight, who have helped you build confidence. You might realize that you have been coached. Maybe it was by your high school track coach, for example, and maybe they coached you on something other than your track skills, or maybe they helped you see that you could actually jump those hurdles when you didn't think you could. Or maybe you received some coaching from your parents or a manager at work. Lots of people have different experiences of what coaches have done for them. And one of the things I would encourage those of you that have worked with a coach before, or those of you who have received coaching, maybe not from an official leadership coach, but from somebody else in your life, I'm curious what those great coaches did for you that caused you to have some success and caused you to remember them at that moment. And in fact, if you've got a 1 or 2 word answer, if you want to type something into your chat box that you could tell all of us through Julie about what coaches have done for you that have helped make you successful, I'll give you some time to do that while I look at this next list of what I often hear from folks. When I talk to folks and I actually have discussions around those coaches that have helped us be successful in our lives, oftentimes what I hear are things like this. Well, the coach challenged me. They really set a high bar, and I was able to meet and exceed that bar. Or certainly number 2, the coach saw something special in me, and maybe you didn't see that in yourself. I certainly know I had that experience with a manager of mine when I was at EDS. This woman saw something in me and an ability to communicate and to influence that I didn't see in myself. And she continually gave me the opportunities to use those communication skills and helped me learn what it is that I could actually have confidence in. So coaches hold us accountable. They expect the best. Optimistic about our future. Those coaches hold great expectations, and I'm wondering if you are holding great expectations for those folks around you. Now, Julie, if we did have anybody that was willing to share a couple of thoughts, you can chime in with those, and probably I captured most of those thoughts on this list here.
You did. Wendy said, helped me to consider other options. Michael offered that they let him make the decision. Critical thinking, skills to problem solve. Craig offered that option.
Yeah.
Lots of very similar to challenged me, motivated me.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Julie. I want to go back to that one that you said where the gentleman said, they let me make the decision. And I think that's an important point with coaching, again, that we'll talk about when we look at our coaching impact diagram. But effective coaches don't always give advice and tell us what to do. And as a matter of fact, An effective coach more often does not tell us what to do. They help us see that we have the answer within ourselves. Now, another big idea that I want to get in your mind before we actually go into a bit more detail around our coaching model is what we call the coaching perspective. And the coaching perspective is really you answering this question. When you look at others, what do you see? When you look at the people around you that you've known a long time, that you've worked with, when you look at them in their faces, what do you see? Do you see a problem that's waiting to be solved? Somebody that's coming into your office again and kind of internally you roll your eyes and you think, oh, they're never going to make it. Or you think, gosh, that person is just, I get so frustrated when they come into my office. Is that the kind of thing that you see? Or are you seeing a reservoir of talent in that person that's just waiting to be tapped? Now, our coaching model at Blue Point is just this. And in fact, we call it the Great Expectations coaching model because we believe that we have to have a high expectation, a great expectation of all those we coach. We've got to look at them as that reservoir of talent waiting to be tapped. If I don't hold that high expectation and instead do that kind of internal eye roll when people walk into the room, the fact is they know that. People know if we don't hold them in the highest regards, even if we don't tell them. And as a matter of fact, they know it and they could potentially become self-fulfilling prophecies of that. I'll tell you a very personal story for me. I received some feedback recently from somebody that I was working with that they thought that I didn't think they could do a job that I asked them to do. And quite frankly, they were right. And I was trying to encourage them, but internally, I just couldn't believe that this person really had the experience. And 6 months later, they told me how that actually impeded their ability to fully step into the role. And it was a true example of something that you would read in a book called Leadership and Self-Deception, if you're very interested in this. It's a great read that will really tell you that people know the perspective that we have on them. So to be an effective coach, you must believe that people can reach their great expectations. And I think this quote really sums up the point I'm making here. Treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they are capable of being. Hold people in that highest regard, and with the proper coaching and feedback in place, you can help them meet that high potential. Now, as we look at coaching, I want to move into just a bit more detail in terms of this high-performance coaching in the workplace. And to do that, I have another question that I'm going to ask everybody. Now, the question is this: which situation lends itself best to a coaching conversation? And then you see the 4 options there, the 5 options, because the 5th option being above all of the above. Now, I'd like you to look at this question. It says, which do you think lends itself best to a coaching conversation? Do you think it's a new employee joining the organization? Do you think it's an emergency situation which requires a quick attention? Do you think it's in a situation where the employee is looking to resolve a new issue with a client? Or do you think the employee has a skill gap that's required for the job? Which of these do you think lends itself best to coaching, or do you think all the above do? And once Julie gets some responses in here, we'll get to hear her or hear all of your answers through the poll.
Hey, Jim. So we're just about there.
Okay, sure. Yeah, this is a little bit more thoughtful question than a yes or no, and I hope I teed it up, Julie, where people could see that I was asking for the very best. So we'll see how these things come out.
Okay, great. I think we've got enough. So it looks like the majority, 70% of the people on the call have said that all of the above are appropriate for a coaching conversation. About 15% said when an employee is looking to resolve a new issue with a client. 11% said an employee has a skill gap for the required job. And 4% said a new employee joining the organization.
So I'll take from that that nobody said an emergency situation.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So I would certainly agree with you guys that all of the above, that you could probably make a case for each of these. Now, what I was asking for was really the best situation, and if I look at that through a pure coaching lens, for me, the best situation for a coaching conversation is that third one, that the employee is looking to resolve a new issue with a client. That's a conversation that I could start off by asking the employee, well, what have you considered so far to get the person that I'm coaching, which we call at Blue Point the talent, to get the talent talking about how they're approaching the issue. If I look at somebody new joining the organization, I might have to do a bit more advice giving or teaching at the beginning just because they're new to the organization. Again, if it's an emergency, probably need to go be much more highly directive than coaching. And again, if it's a skill gap, might have to have another conversation rather than just a coaching conversation. Now, I put this question ahead of time, and let me kind of tell you what my thinking is behind it through the next diagram, which we call the coaching impact. Now, let me just explain this diagram before I go into detail. Along the side of this diagram, you can see it's labeled performance agenda. And basically it's saying who owns the performance agenda of the conversation, either the leader coach, you, the person that's doing the coaching, or the talent, the person receiving the coaching. Now, along the bottom, you see 4 basic management techniques. Directing is where you're telling somebody exactly what they need to do. And you can tell from the ownership perspective here, you as the leader coach really have all of the ownership when you're being highly directive. When you go to advising and teaching, it's really a little bit less about you, and it's much more about the talent. And when you get down here to pure coaching, the performance agenda is really 100% the talents. So that talent that's coming to me with a new issue with a client, they've brought the agenda of the conversation. As the coach, I can just say, okay, well, what have you tried to resolve this so far to get that person talking? Now, if that person's come to me with an issue and I get them talking, coaching helps you help them find their own answer to the problem. And what the research indicates is that you'll have the longest term impact and the highest long-term impact on that talent by letting them own the agenda. They care about it, they're bought into it because it's their challenge, and you're just being the coach that's the mirror, that's asking questions, that's providing some acknowledgement to the challenge. You could short-term this in saying, like what many of you know, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You coach a man to be a better fisherman, you can feed him for a lifetime. I took some liberty with that, but hopefully you get the point. So if you look at this diagram and then back to the question, that's really what leads me to believe that that would be the best scenario. But really, there's no black and white in coaching, and all of those situations may lead to a coaching conversation. And again, if you have any questions or comments about this, please feel free to type those in, and Julie will interrupt me to get some questions or comments answered. Now, as I mentioned, our coaching model here at Blue Point is called the Great Expectations Coaching Model. So when you're all the way to the right of that diagram, you're really balancing this idea of earning the right to coach that person, creating a perfect type of partnership with that person, and also engaging them in dangerous conversations. Now, when I talk about earning the right to coach, I'm talking about you walking your talk, you being the kind of leader that's not asking anybody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. And we'll look at the characteristics of what earning the right to coach looks like. The perfect partnership is about creating a peer-to-peer relationship with this person you're coaching. Not necessarily manager-employee, but peers that are working together on a problem. Now again, I know this can be challenging for some leaders, and that's why you have to walk that tightrope that I put in the beginning. So recognize that while coaching isn't always appropriate, when you can get to that partnership place, that's when you're in coaching. And then finally, this idea of dangerous conversations. Performance-changing, truth-telling conversations, that's what leads to behavior change, And for some people, those dangerous conversations, like me, also leave you with a little bit of butterflies in your stomach, because you might be thinking, am I really going to ask this challenging question? But you have the ability to do that, to help the other person and to help the business move forward. So if I was to sum up our Great Expectations coaching model in a sentence, I'd say Great Expectations coaching is about earning the right to be welcomed into a peer-to-peer relationship and engage in a performance-changing conversation. That's what we're trying to do whenever you are being a leader coach. Now, I want to talk briefly about each of the rings of the model to give you some additional awareness, and we are going to start with earning the right to coach. Now, earning the right to coach requires you to be a bit self-reflective and think about what are you doing to walk your own talk. And Manfred Keith DeVries here has a great quote. It says, healthy leaders are very talented in self-observation and in self-analysis. The best leaders are highly motivated to spend time in self-reflection. And the idea of earning the right to coach is for you to ask yourself, am I showing up as an authentic person? Do people see me and know that I'm genuine and I'm honest in my feedback and my approach? Or do they see me and think I have another agenda? When I earn the right to coach, I'm aware of my own gifts and talents, and I'm not afraid to use them. Now, this isn't being boastful. This isn't having a lack of humility. It's more having the confidence in knowing that I know what my skills and talents are, and once I know mine, I'm actually better equipped to help you see yours. And then that third piece of earning the right to coach, noble intention. Noble intention. Why is it that you would want to coach anyway? Why do you step into this challenging role of leader and then take on the additional challenge of being a coach? Well, there are many intentions that you could say about why people step into this role of coaching. Maybe they want to have more influence through the organization. Maybe they want to be liked and they think that people will like them if they start coaching others. For me personally, my noble intention around coaching is of being service to others. For me, it was something that was instilled in me by my mom early on in my life about the importance of service to those around us, in our communities, in our workplaces, and in our families. And for me, I have found I can be of best service to others in being in this role of coaching. Now, you might want to consider, those of you out there, what would your noble intention be for adding the coaching discipline to your own discipline as leaders within an organization? And if any of you are willing to share your own intention about why it is that you want to add coaching, I would encourage you to type it in that chat box, and again, Julie could share those with us in a little bit. So if anybody has a one or two word noble intention that they would share with the group about why it is they want to coach, I would encourage you to type those in now. Now, Julie, this is probably asking a bit more of a personal question, so I don't know whether we'll get any responses or not, but I am curious, and we'll just give folks just a couple of seconds to see if we get anything.
Yeah, we're getting quite a few, actually. So Carrie says developing others. Similar, John also says add value to others. Building confidence to others is what Tony Ann offers. A desire to build a better team and prepare staff for their next position in their career.
That's a good one to stop with right there.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that desire to build a better team and get people ready for the next position, maybe even the position that you hold right now. So those are wonderful intentions that people have, and all of those intentions really help give you the strength to have these coaching conversations, slow things down. And so I encourage you to hold on tight to that intention and know that that will help you earn the right to coach those around you. Thank you all for giving those, and Julie, thanks for summarizing a few of those for us. Now, I want to take a little bit more of a detailed look at the next ring of our coaching model, a perfect partnership. Perfect partnership has three components to it as well: appreciation, confrontation, and accountability. And we see these as the three components necessary to create that peer-to-peer relationship. I want to talk about each of these individually, starting with this idea of appreciation. A good coach is not afraid to offer acknowledgement and appreciation in the coaching conversation, highlighting what the individual is doing that's working well. Now, I had a very interesting experience of this. Just recently, I was working with a leader, and the leader was actually delivering a message as a part of a team meeting. And afterwards, and I asked the leader how it went, all this person could say were all the things that he didn't think he did well. And it was like we saw two different meetings, because what I saw was many, many good things. I think the leader was being very hard on themselves. And as I was talking to the leader and telling them what I saw, the leader stopped me and says, you know, Jim, you are trained to see the best in the situations, and I don't have that training. And that was such a key to me about what we do as coaches when we're being appreciative. What we're really doing is we're mining for gold with the people around us. We're looking for those gold nuggets that people do well, and we want to give those as acknowledgments and affirmations and appreciations to the people that we're coaching. People need feedback about what it is that they do well. And for us as leader coaches, we have to have a golden eye to be able to see those nuggets. And if you don't see the nuggets of good, that's something that you need, a muscle that you need to exercise to be able to appreciate the good that is happening around you and with the skills and talents that people have that are helping move the organization forward. Now, I'm not saying here that I'm Pollyanna, that I think everything is good. We also need to confront performance gaps as well. So the second piece of a perfect partnership is this idea of confrontation. Now, this is not confrontation of a fight or an argument. This is a confrontation about holding a mirror up to the person that we're coaching and giving them a view of what we see of them, both the things that we see well in appreciation and the gaps or the ways that they're not showing up in the best way possible. Again, continuous feedback as a part of our coaching. Now, one thing that you might want to consider when you think about how do you confront people, you might want to consider how would you want to be confronted. So this is just a question for you to ponder yourself. But if you think about something that you know you want to change about yourself, how would someone best confront you on that issue? Would they, you think, do you prefer to be talked to one-on-one and to be very direct? Do you prefer, as someone I was recently just coaching said, well, I'd much rather be made comfortable first, like we go out for a coffee, we say that we're going to have this conversation, and so that I can feel safe to hear the feedback that the person is giving. Everybody has a bit different way about that they want to be confronted, and my encouragement is you think about your own way that you want to be confronted, and then recognize that probably everybody that you coach wants to be confronted just a little bit differently. And so you'll have to learn about them so that you can understand what's the best way to confront them, both with their greatness and with the times that they're not performing at the level you need them to. When you do that, again, you're creating that perfect partnership, that perfect engagement with them. Now, the third piece of our perfect partnership leg of the Great Expectations coaching model is around accountability. And the way that we look at accountability in our model is through a model that's referred to as transactional analysis. Now, some of you may be familiar with this model. It's been around for a long time, and we're now applying it to coaching conversations. So you can see what I've got on the screen here is basically two people in a conversation, a leader, coach, and a talent, and recognizing that there are three positions that each of these people can come to, and really any of us can, in any conversation. We may be speaking from the perspective of a parent, where we're trying to be controlling and telling people what to do, or more nurturing or offering some empathy, or maybe being a little bit cynical as well. You can see the second piece is the adult, the responsible partner in a conversation who is taking responsibility for their own stuff and letting you hold responsibility for yours. And the third place is a childlike position where we might abdicate all of our responsibility or become a victim to the circumstances around us. Our challenge as leaders, coaches, is to stay in the adult part of the conversation here so that we can get the talent to also be that responsible adult. Now let's look at some examples of some conversations so you can get a better understanding of how this plays out. This first example conversation is the talent talking to their coach and saying, my boss never gives me a performance appraisal. And the coach responding as, that's awful. Your boss should be assessing your performance. That's not really a coaching conversation that's going to go anywhere with that statement from the leader coach. I don't think the leader coach is being fully accountable for their language there, because you're placing blame on somebody who's not in the conversation, and you're letting that person be, quite frankly, a victim to the fact that their boss isn't giving them a performance appraisal. Or a conversation just might be two cynics talking to each other. Yeah, it's really hard to find the right talent that I need for the job, for my organization right now. And the coach responding that, yeah, that really is awful right now. There's no talent out there. Again, not a conversation that's going to go anywhere. But let's take a look at this, where it might be a little bit different. If you go back to that slide, or the conversation where the talent's saying, my boss has never given me a performance appraisal, notice the coach's response. What can you do about this? That's the response of an adult responsible partner who is moving the accountability from the boss who's not giving the performance appraisal to the person sitting across from them. Now we can get to a performance-changing conversation because the action is with the person in the room and seeing what they need to do. The conversation might flow from this. The next question the leader coach might ask is, well, what do you think about your performance? Then the talent, in an adult responsible partner's way, could say, well, I'm actually feeling a bit overwhelmed right now, but I'd like to see what I can do differently. Here is where we can start to make some traction in a coaching conversation, because it's actually the person that I'm speaking to is the person that we're talking to from responsible adult to responsible adult. And the person, the talent, can now say, well, what is it that I'm going to do differently are these three things. So all of that are examples of how, as leader coaches, we need to take on the mantle of that responsible partner, always focusing the conversation on the person in front of us and ensuring that that person is taking accountability for their statements. When you do that, you're holding that person accountable and yourself accountable for your language, and you are working to create that perfect partnership between you and the talent you're trying to coach. Julie, I'm just wondering, I think you're a parent, so I'm just going to put you on the spot here, but when you see that parent, child, and adult, do you recognize yourself at times in work conversations, or even when you're talking to people where some of those roles might come in that may or may not be appropriate, that kind of keep things from being accountable?
Yes, absolutely. I can think back, to a number of different occasions in my previous work experience where lots of those different things apply. It makes you kind of really look at yourself and go, oh my goodness, I was totally being the child in that situation.
And the fact is, we do all speak from all three of those at any given time. It's just part of human nature. And oftentimes, Julie, when I teach this in class, I see a lot of knowing nods out in the room, and I bet we have some on the line today as well. So I don't want people to beat themselves up about that. This is an increased level of awareness to say, am I really moving the conversation forward, or am I just kind of in a vent session here, or am I trying to control the person around me? And coaching is really having that person responsible for their stuff and me responsible for mine. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot there, Julie. I appreciate you working with me there. Yeah. Let's take a look at the last portion of this Great Expectations coaching model called Dangerous Conversations. Now, this quote is from a book called Fierce Conversations by a woman named Susan Scott. And I think for me, it sums up in many ways what we mean about dangerous conversations. There is something within us that responds deeply to people who level with us, who do not pamper us or offer us compromises, but instead describe reality so simply and so compellingly that the truth seems inevitable, and we cannot help but to recognize it. The one person who can most accurately describe reality without laying blame will emerge the leader. Dangerous conversations are about speaking the taboo, speaking the reality that needs to be named. Many people say it's the white elephant in the room. And if we can find a way to engage our talent around the white elephant, talk about those taboos, that's where performance change can occur. That's where people know, all right, this leader is really going to speak truth to me. I do want to step up, be the responsible partner here, and take ownership for my piece of this conversation. Now, I believe that these 4 coaching power tools that we're about to look at can aid you in your dangerous conversations. Now, I'm not laying out for you, obviously, a 5-step process to coaching. We just don't believe coaching is that simplistic, where it just you follow these 5 steps and you're done. I believe coaching really encompasses all of the conversation that we have with the talent across from us. That being said, I think these tools, these 4 coaching power tools, can be useful to help us help the talent gain insight into their challenge. And you see the 4 coaching power tools there: acknowledgement, big questions, intuitional perspectives, and silence. Let me talk about each of these, and I'll start with, the power tool of acknowledgement. Now, the power tool of acknowledgement is basically just seeing the person across from you in the current state that they're in. If it's an emotional state, if they're frustrated, if they're happy, if they're anxious, or even just listening to what the person is saying by paraphrasing it back. That can be another powerful acknowledgement. It lets them know, I see you as someone who's got a challenge or who's got an opportunity for the business or who is frustrated with the current situation. Now, I often say this in my classes and take some heat for it sometimes, but as a general rule, men tend to be challenged with this idea of acknowledgement. Now, I know there are plenty of women out there who do like to solve problems and to fix things, but in general, it's the men who hear something and they want to fix it. And if anybody's ever been told before, look, I don't want you to solve my problem, I just want you to listen to me, what that person is asking for is acknowledgement. And so try sometime when you hear somebody laying out a problem, laying out a challenge, to just paraphrase it back. Or just to say, yeah, I hear that you're struggling with that right now, and see if that does something different than really blowing past them and trying to solve the problem for themselves. The second power tool of coaching is this idea of big questions. Questions really are the realm and the working tool of the coach, asking broad, open-ended questions that help people gain some insight. As a matter of fact, what I usually tell people that are training to be coaches is, look, if you're doing more talking than the talent, than the person that you're coaching, you're probably not doing it right. You really need to get the talent talking, and you can get them talking through questions. Now, to look at some tips around questions that I would recommend as a coach, some things that you might want to consider are, first off, use open-ended questions. Don't just ask yes-no questions. Those don't create conversation. Ask open-ended questions. What caused you to think of that? How are you approaching that? Rather than, have you tried this or have you tried this? If you use open-ended questions, people tend to talk more. Turn their questions around. So if somebody asks you a direct question, ask it right back to them. Well, what do you think about that? So often, people are just trained to kind of ask for permission or ask the other's opinion rather than actually stating the own opinion that they have. Great coaches get others to talk and even to start answering their own questions. You might want to consider asking powerful questions that expand the thinking talents. And here's a couple of them. What matters most to you right now? If you had unlimited resources, what would you do? What one thing impedes your performance? Notice each of those questions is designed to expand the talent's thinking, to help them think broader than what they're thinking about right now. And so as you begin to engage the talent around you, think about a powerful question that you could pose that would have them gain insight into their own challenge. And then you just get to sit back, listen, use that power tool of acknowledgement to paraphrase back what you're hearing to them, and see if they can find their own solution to the problem that they've set forth. The other two power tools that I mentioned, I just want to go back to those briefly. Intuitional perspectives and silence. Now, intuitional perspectives, kind of a fancy couple of words to say follow your gut. And I think effective coaches are coaches who take the conversation that they're having in their head. Have you ever been talking to somebody and you start to have a second conversation in your head? Maybe you're wondering what it is that they really believe or wonder what they've tried before. When you're being an effective coach, you actually take that second conversation and just ask it to the person sitting across from you. That second conversation in your head represents your intuition. It may be right, it may be wrong, but whatever it is, use your intuition. Don't be tied to it being correct, but more often than not, our guts are telling us something that the talent needs to know. And then that final power tool, the power tool of silence. Again, Susan Scott from Fierce Conversations has a quote. She says, "Let silence do the heavy lifting." For me, what that means is when I ask a challenging question to that talent sitting across from me, when I challenge them, I might get a little bit nervous asking that challenging question, and I might want to answer for them or fill up the space so that the tension of that question doesn't sit in the air. However, that tension of the question helps the talent gain insight. Let them do the work by letting silence do the heavy lifting of the anxiety. If you ask a challenging question, take some time and take some breaths so that they have time to respond and to answer, and again, to find their own way to solution. I like this quote here from Marcel Proust. He says, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." And I think that's what we do as leader coaches. We help people see the same situation from a different perspective. You can also think of it as this picture right here, that sometimes as leader coaches, we're just giving people a new set of eyes so that they can challenge their own assumptions and they can see something they've been struggling with a fresh perspective. Maybe just by explaining it to you, the leader coach, they find that fresh perspective themselves, and you didn't have to do anything but acknowledge and listen. Be the mirror back to them and see what new eyes you give them as a result of that. So those four power tools, acknowledgement, big questions, intuitional perspectives, and silence, are specific tools that you can use right away after this webinar as you begin to think about who can I begin to engage in a performance-changing conversation? Who has an agenda here that I can support in a responsible adult way by engaging in a coaching conversation with them? Now, I've covered many of the basics of our Leader as Coach model at a very high level here in today's webinar. We do have a book on coaching, Unleashed, written by Greg Thompson and Suzanne Biro. You can see their contact information there. And Julie reminded me before the webinar that on our website, you can download a free copy of an electronic version of this book. Now, it's not the full version of the book. It's a subset of the book that's been put into an electronic version. But that's available off of our main webpage, isn't it, Julie?
Yes, that's right, Jim. It's you can find it on the home page at www.bluepointleadership.com.
That's great. And so if you want to take a look at that, that'll give you some additional information in terms of all the concepts that I've talked about here. And then you could take the next step even then by ordering your copy of Unleashed today, and you could get even more details about how you can use your own skills that you already have to be a leader coach, to be able to inspire others within your organization to solve their own problems and to be able to drive the business forward. You have that capability in you. Now, it's the end of my presentation today, and so Julie, I just wanted to check in. Were there any questions that came in or any comments that we could handle in our remaining time here that might be helpful to our audience?
We did have a few questions come in. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but Randy was asking what is the difference between mentoring versus coaching, and perhaps you can just address that quickly before we wrap up.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you for the question, Randy. You know, that's one that I hear a lot from folks, and I certainly have an opinion on that. So for me, a mentor is somebody who has, whose shoes I would like to walk into. A mentor is somebody who has a set of experiences that I would like to grow into. For example, like I'm a coach and a facilitator, and I have a mentor who is a gentleman who's been in this business a lot longer than I have. And I kind of see him as where I would like to be in a few years. Now, for that, of course, he's got a level of expertise in this business that I can then be mentored by and bring him specific challenges with. A coach, on the other hand, I don't see a coach as needing the specific content experience of the person that they're coaching. For example, I happen to be coaching a person in a pharmaceutical organization right now, and I'll tell you, I don't have any experience with pharmaceuticals other than taking an aspirin when I have a headache. But it's not my experience in pharmaceuticals that this person is looking insights to. The person is looking to insights into their own leadership and to their own challenges that they're working with. I can mirror back and paraphrase what I'm hearing from them and challenge and acknowledge them without knowing anything about their business. So that's the distinction that I see between the two. A mentor is somebody who knows the business that I'm in, and I want to walk in their shoes at some point. A coach does not necessarily have that content experience, but has the ability to ask questions to help me gain greater insight into my own challenges or opportunities. And again, Randy, I hear that question a lot, and so thank you for that and for giving us all, I'm sure somebody else was thinking that as well. Now, Julie, you've captured the rest of the questions, right? So we'll be able to follow up on those in email after today's webinar?
That's correct. We will do that. So for right now, I want to say thank you, Jim, to you. Thanks so much for your time and your expertise as you shared with us about coaching. Some really great information here. And I know stuff that I'm going to be able to apply right away as well. And thank you to everyone else who participated on the call. It's great to have such interactivity, and we're really thankful that you could join us today. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Everybody have a good day.